Welcome to Echo Tales. Sometimes the quiet moments are the loudest warnings. Let me take you into the quietest moment that shattered me more than any affair, fight, or lie ever could. It happened in our kitchen. There was no thunderstorm outside, no dramatic music, just Dana stirring her tea, tapping her spoon like a ticking clock. I reached for her, not with flowers, not with a speech, just for a hug, a simple, tired hug. My arms barely touched her before she recoiled like I was covered in mold. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You think you earned that?" No yelling, no slap, just that. And that's the exact moment I realized. I'd become an inconvenience in my own home. I'm Marshall, and if you think this is another sob story from a guy who didn't see it coming, you're wrong. I saw the signs. I chose to ignore them because hope, yeah, that thing people say keeps you alive. Sometimes it just keeps you stuck. You see, my wife started treating kindness like it had to be paid for in advance. Her smiles were like tips, only given when she felt like it. Her phone was always face down, and her laughter was always louder when I wasn't around. I used to believe she was just tired, overworked, hormonal, the usual excuses. But no excuse fits when your wife flinches at your touch like you're a stranger, or when she types faster whenever you walk into the room. That night, after she rejected the hug, she walked away like nothing had happened. I sat in the same spot for maybe 20 minutes, trying to find a reason to stay that didn't sound like begging. There wasn't one. So, before sunrise, I wrote a note. Nothing long, just 4 words. Earn my return. I didn't pack a full suitcase, just a change of clothes, my wallet, and an old hoodie that still smelled like her back when she still wore my clothes to bed. I left the house before the tea she made had even cooled. And I didn't tell her where I was going because the truth was I didn't know either. But what I did find in the hours, days, and messages that followed proved that the person I left wasn't my wife anymore and maybe never was. After I left, I drove for hours. No map, no music, just the sound of my own breathing and the engine beneath me. I ended up in a small town I'd never heard of. The kind of place where the gas station still uses paper receipts and the diner waitress calls you Han, even when you look like a sleep-deprived ghost. I checked into a roadside motel with buzzing lights and peeling wallpaper. It was perfect. It matched how I felt, forgotten, flickering, barely held together. I thought I'd feel some kind of relief after leaving the note. I expected maybe guilt or sadness or anger. But what hit me instead was something colder doubt. Not about leaving, but about how long I'd been blind. That's what scared me. Because if she could look at me like a stranger now, how long had she been looking at someone else like home? I tried to distract myself with bad coffee and worse TV, but her voice kept echoing in my head. "You think you earned that?" It was such a specific choice of words. "Not I'm not in a mood or not now," she said. Earned like I was being graded in a class I didn't even know I'd enrolled in. That night, I logged into our shared phone plan. Not to spy, just to check. That's what I told myself, just to look. The call logs were routine until they weren't. One number kept popping up, always at night, always after I got to bed, and never shorter than 30 minutes, sometimes 2 hours. My stomach turned. I didn't recognize the number, but it had a local area code. I stared at it like it might confess something if I looked long enough. The next day, I called the number from a pay phone, blocking my ID. A man answered calm, confident, not confused, not surprised. He didn't ask who I was. He just said, "You're calling sooner than I expected." I hung up. My hand was shaking. He didn't even ask who I was. That said more than any voicemail could. I wanted to scream, to drive back home, and demand answers. But what would that do? Make her lie more creatively? No. I needed to understand who she had become before I confronted her. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called her sister Rachel. Rachel and Dana had always been close, too close. But Rachel never liked me much. Still, she picked up after one ring. And when I said I left Dana, she didn't even pretend to be surprised. She just said about time. Those 2 words cracked something open inside me. I asked her what she meant, and she said, "You think she's just cold now? She's been eyes for years. You just kept pretending it was a phase." I wanted to argue, defend Dana, but I couldn't because deep down I knew Rachel was right. Then Rachel said something that still messes with my head. She said, "You should have seen the way she acted at the company retreat. That wasn't a wife missing her husband. That was a woman acting like she didn't have one. And then she hung up. Now, I wasn't just heartbroken. I was humiliated. Whatever was happening with that man on the phone, it wasn't new. It wasn't an accident. It was planned, built federal. While I was out here trying to save us with lemon soda and folded laundry, she was slipping into someone else's arms like she'd done it 100 times before. And I had no idea what I was going to do next. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, shoes still on, staring at the dim orange light bleeding through the broken blinds. I kept thinking about Rachel's words. Not just what she said, but how easily she said it. Like everyone around me had known, and I was the last to catch up. It's funny. You think you're sharing a life with someone, but maybe you're just holding the flashlight while they dig your emotional grave behind your back. I try to piece it all together, scene by scene, rewinding the last year of my life like some twisted home movie. The late night drives Dana insisted she needed to clear her head. The sudden obsession with yoga when she hated sweating. The brand new dress I never saw her wear at home, but caught in the background of a blurry group photo on her coworker's Instagram. A photo she never mentioned taking. A night she told me she had a migraine and the comment she used to make almost in passing. "You've changed, Marshall. I miss who we used to be." As if she wasn't the one steering us off a cliff with a smile. But nothing burned more than remembering the last birthday we spent together. I made a reservation at her favorite steakhouse. Wrote a little speech I never got to say because she spent the entire dinner glued to her phone, giggling at messages I now know weren't from Rachel or work. At the time, I told myself it was stress, that she'd snap out of it, that if I just kept showing up, kept proving I loved her, she'd remember why she loved me. But love doesn't get lost like that. It gets replaced. I had to know who he was. That man on the other end of those nightly calls. So I went full cliche, created a fake profile, generic name, clean photo, nothing suspicious. I messaged him from a quiet corner of a coffee shop the next morning, acting like a curious stranger who found his number on my girlfriend's phone and wanted to know if he was involved with a married woman. The response came fast. 3 words. "What's her name?" I stared at that message for almost a full minute, heart pounding. That was not the answer of a man denying anything. That was someone doing inventory. I replied, "Dana." He didn't write back for 10 minutes. And in that silence, I started sweating through my shirt. But when he finally replied, it wasn't what I expected. "She told me you two were separated." There it was. The narrative she built carefully, brick by brick, while I was still coming home with groceries and asking if she wanted to watch a movie. She had rewritten our story for him, erased me from the picture while I was still living in the frame. I didn't respond. What could I say? The man was just another fool in her game. Like me, just dressed differently. I walked back to my truck and sat there for an hour, engine off, hands on the wheel. I felt like I was holding on to a life that didn't exist anymore and maybe never did. Because the worst kind of betrayal isn't when someone cheats on you. It's when they make you believe you were the only one who mattered while slowly replacing you piece by piece until even your shadow doesn't recognize itself in the mirror. And now I wasn't just heartbroken. I was erased. A footnote in her story rewritten with someone else's name. But something inside me finally shifted. This wasn't going to be just a story about a man who walked away quietly. No, she wanted to live like I didn't exist. I was about to give her exactly that. I drove for 6 hours without stopping. Somewhere between state lines, I started deleting photos off my phone. Not out of spite, more like survival. Each picture felt like a punch in the ribs. Dana on the beach with her sunglasses too big for her face. Dana blowing out candles at her last birthday. Dana asleep in the passenger seat during our road trip to Maine. I had held on to these like they were proof of something real, but now they just mocked me. Smiling illusions. Highlights from a lie. I ended up in an old fishing town where no one knew me. The motel was cheap, the walls thin, the bed creaky, but for the first time in months, I could breathe without waiting for the sound of her phone vibrating under a pillow. I spent the first day in silence, eating instant noodles and staring at the ceiling fan like it had answers. I didn't cry, not because I was strong. I just didn't have anything left. My heart felt like a room that had already been emptied by someone else. Then came the message. She didn't call. She texted. Just 5 words. "Where the hell are you?" "No." "Are you okay?" "No, I'm sorry." just frustration that her puppet had dropped the strings. I didn't answer. 2 hours later came another. You left me, as if I'd walked out for cigarettes and forgot to come home. I turned my phone face down. I didn't want to read the rest of her performance. I could already imagine it. Fake concern followed by guilt tripping followed by blaming me for leaving without a word, even though she'd been emotionally absent for a year. The next day, my buddy Kevin called. We hadn't talked in a while, but I had told him I needed space. His voice was hesitant, like he was holding back something heavy. And then he said it. Marshall, she was at that bar last night, the one near our old work. She wasn't alone. I felt my grip on the phone tighten. She was with him. He continued. Tall guy looked a little younger. She didn't look upset. She looked comfortable. That word hit me harder than affair. Comfortable. Like she had rehearsed this scene long enough to stop pretending it was temporary. She didn't miss me. She was already replacing me in the places we used to haunt. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was thank Kevin and hang up. That's when a nausea hit. Not because of her being with someone else, but because I finally understood she hadn't made a mistake. She made a choice repeatedly, and I had let her. That night, I walked to the end of the pier and sat on a cold wooden bench, listening to the waves slap against the rocks. My hands were numb, but my mind was on fire. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to hurt her back. I wanted something deeper. I wanted to vanish from her life so thoroughly that even the memory of me became inconvenient. So I started erasing myself. I canceled our joint accounts, changed all my passwords, transferred my small savings into a private account under a new bank, quietly notified my job I'd be working remotely from a long-term personal location. I even mailed the keys to our storage unit to her with a sticky note. Take what you want. I already did. She could keep the house, the car, the furniture, all of it. Let her build a life with the new guy using the skeleton of the one she destroyed. I didn't need things anymore. I needed distance. I needed dignity. And as for her, she still had no idea where I was. And that was the first real power I'd had in months. 3 days passed before she switched tactics. Her messages stopped sounding annoyed and started sounding sweet, or what she thought passed for sweet. The first one said, I miss you, March. Come home so we can talk. I didn't respond. The second said, I overreacted. You misunderstood me. Don't throw away everything we've built. Still nothing for me. I watched her cycle through the emotional buffet. Anger, confusion, fake nostalgia, like she was checking off a script written for husbands who hadn't yet found out the truth. But I wasn't her husband anymore. Not in the way she remembered me, the way she thought she could control. I wasn't the man begging for closeness anymore. That version of me died the moment I heard another man casually say, she told me you were separated. What I was now was invisible, and she hated that. The silence must have eaten at her, because next came the nuclear option. She showed up at my brother's house. Now we're not close. My brother Jonah and I had our share of disagreements, but he knew enough to keep his mouth shut. He called me from the garage while she was standing in his driveway, trying to act surprised I hadn't told him anything. Jonah's voice was tight with irritation, but not at me. She looks frantic, man, like someone trying to sell a house that already burned down. I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was pathetic. This woman who pushed me away with disgust when I tried to show her love, now standing in front of my brother like we were 2 steps away from some rom-com reconciliation. The irony was suffocating. She said she doesn't know what happened. Jonah added, she said, you snapped, that you're probably depressed or going through a crisis. Of course she did. That's what people like Dana do. They rewrite the story before anyone else gets a chance to read it. They paint you unstable, so their betrayal looks like a coping mechanism. I told Jonah not to say a word to her, and he didn't. But before he hung up, he said something that stuck with me. You always look tired around her. I didn't realize until now how different your voice sounds. After that, I turned off the phone for 2 whole days. No contact, no drama, just the sea and the motel ceiling and the slow, painful process of shedding a life I had once fought so hard to protect. But the peace didn't last because Dana wasn't done yet. On the 5th day, I made the mistake of logging into my old email. There was a message from her, long and wordy, written like a last resort. She didn't beg. Dana never begged, but she did something more calculated. She dangled guilt like it was candy. Said she needed closure. Said she wanted to explain. She even ended the email with, "You're not blameless either. Marshall, you stopped being the man I married." That part, that was the last crack in the dam because I had broken myself for that woman. I dimmed my voice, my needs, my instincts, all to preserve a marriage she had already evacuated from. And now she wanted to retroactively blame me for the ruins. No, not anymore. I closed the laptop. I didn't reply, but I did something else. I called a lawyer and I told him everything because if Dana wanted closure, she was about to get it signed, stamped, and notarized. The lawyer's office was small and smelled like stale coffee. But the man sitting across from me was sharp. His name was Alan Voss, recommended by one of my old clients, a guy who once said, "If you ever want out clean, Voss is the scalpel." And that's what I needed. Not a hammer, not revenge, just something precise. Something that would let me disappear from Dana's life without giving her another opening to pull me back into her twisted performance. Alan asked me to walk him through everything. So I did. I told him about the hug she rejected, the phrase that haunted me. "You think you earned that?" The late night calls, the lies she told the other man, the way she was rewriting our marriage in real time. I could tell by the way his pen froze halfway through scribbling notes that he was already piecing together how deep this had gone. "Do you suspect physical infidelity?" he asked. I hesitated. No hard proof, but emotionally. "She left me months ago." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes that's worse." He was right. The worst part wasn't her being with someone else. It was knowing she had mentally, emotionally, and spiritually checked out while I was still laying next to her every night, thinking maybe tomorrow she'd smile like she used to. Alan leaned back, thoughtful. "We can file for separation first." Quietly, no noise, no letters to her yet. "We prepare everything. When you're ready to sign and send, it'll all be in motion before she can blink." That's what I needed. Control, privacy, peace. So I agreed. He started drafting paperwork and gave me a burner number to contact him through, one that Dana couldn't trace. It felt surreal walking out of there with a manila folder that essentially held the blueprint to the end of my marriage. But oddly, it was the first time in months I felt like I was making a decision for me. Later that night, I went for a long walk by the shore. The town was quiet, dark in that comforting way small towns get after 10. I passed couples holding hands, laughing softly under street lamps. For a second, I felt a stab of grief. Not jealousy, just mourning. I used to have that. I used to believe I'd grow old with Dana, complain about taxes together, argue over thermostat settings, and decide on what color to paint the kitchen. But she'd stolen that ending from me long ago, and I was finally done waiting for her to give it back. Back at the motel, I checked my phone. 23 missed messages. 5 voicemails. Dana was spiraling. Her tone had changed again. Now it was poetic. "We've been through so much. Don't let one hard season erase us." Another read. "I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes. Just tell me where you are." And just like that, I realized she didn't want me back. She wanted her safety net, her audience, her backup plan. I was never plan A. Maybe I never was. The next morning, Alan emailed me the finalized separation draft. I didn't open it right away. I stared at the subject line, prepared filing, M. Clark versus D. Clark, and sat in silence. I wasn't sure if I was ready to be a man with no marriage, but I was absolutely sure I couldn't go back to being a man who begged for one. And then, just as I was closing my laptop, another email came in from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, "You should know what your wife's been doing." And the attachment, it would change everything. I didn't open it right away. That email sat in my inbox for at least 20 minutes while I just stared at the screen, heart pounding like a war drum. The subject line, "You should know what your wife's been doing," burned a hole straight through me. I hovered my finger over the trackpad, debating whether I was ready to see something that might tear away the last pieces of a lie I had been stupid enough to protect. But curiosity and pain always win. And so, with one hesitant click, I opened the message. No greeting, no name, no explanation, just 3 photos. Blurry, probably taken from phone. The first one showed Dana in a booth at a restaurant I didn't recognize, sitting across from a man with a sharp jawline and a stupid amount of confidence on his face. Her hand was resting on his, not reaching, not hesitating, resting like it belonged there. The second photo caught them leaving the place together, arm in arm. Dana was laughing. Not the forced closed-lipped chuckle she used around me in the last months, but the full head tilted, carefree laugh I hadn't seen in years. A laugh I used to think I was responsible for. A laugh that clearly hadn't disappeared. It had just found a new direction. And in the third photo, it was them in the parking lot and his hands were all over her. I stared at that one the longest, not because it shocked me. By now, I was well past shock, but because it proved something I tried to avoid believing. She wasn't conflicted. She wasn't confused. She wasn't processing. She had already moved on. And worse, she was comfortable doing it out in the open. Like, she didn't even consider the possibility that someone might see her. That's how invisible I'd become. I scrolled down, hoping for a name or clue as to who sent them. Nothing. Just one line at the bottom. Figured you deserve the truth. I would if I were you. I closed my laptop, sat back in the motel chair, and stared at the ceiling like it might offer a lifeline. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. All I felt was cold. The kind of cold that doesn't go away with a blanket or hot shower. The kind that settles into your bones and whispers. You were never really chosen. That night, I wrote the email I should have written months ago. I sent it to Dana. Short, direct, no emotion, no openings for negotiation. Dana, I've seen everything. The separation papers will be arriving next week. Please do not contact me again. Marshall. She replied twice within the hour. First, a wall of text that tried to spin her actions as confusion, stress, mistakes. Then a second message with only one sentence. I didn't think you'd ever leave. That line hit me harder than any of the photos, because it was the most honest thing she'd ever said. She didn't think I'd leave because I never had, because I always forgave, because I was the man who kept folding even when the house had burned down around him. But this time I wasn't folding. I was rebuilding somewhere far away from the person who broke me with a shrug. The next morning, I signed the papers. The separation was now real legally and emotionally. Alan would handle the delivery. My job was done. And yet, just when I thought I was finally free, one more twist was waiting. Later that afternoon, Jonah called again. His voice sounded off tight, like he was holding something back. Marsh, you need to come back. There's something you should see. Something about Dana. She left something behind in your old office, and I don't think she meant to. I drove back for the first time since leaving. Heart heavy, but strangely calm. Jonah had sounded too serious to ignore. And after everything, I figured I owed it to myself to face whatever was left behind, to close this chapter with both eyes open. The town felt different, smaller somehow, like a place I'd already outgrown. I didn't go near the house. Instead, I pulled into Jonah's driveway, and he met me with a look that said this wasn't just gossip or some leftover dish Dana forgot. He led me to his garage where an old file box from my former home office sat untouched. She dropped this off. He said it was yours. But when I was moving it, something fell out. You need to see it. Inside the box, beneath some old receipts and photos, was a sealed envelope labeled only with my name. Not typed, not scribbled, but written carefully in Dana's handwriting. I hesitated, then opened it. The letter inside wasn't what I expected. It wasn't angry or manipulative or full of justifications. It was raw, honest, the kind of letter people write when they think no one will ever read it. She admitted to everything, the affair, the lies, the emotional withdrawal. She wrote about how she started pulling away because she didn't feel worthy of love anymore. And instead of fixing herself, she punished the person who kept loving her anyway. One line stopped me cold. You were the only person who saw the real me and still stayed. And I destroyed that. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't beg for a second chance. She just told the truth. For the first time in a long time, I felt something shift inside. Not toward her, but toward myself. I wasn't broken. I wasn't weak. I was loyal in a world that doesn't always reward it. And now I was finally letting go of someone who had already let go of me a long time ago. I left the letter behind. Back at the coast, I started to rebuild. Slowly, quietly, I found a small place to rent with chipped paint and uneven floors, but it felt like mine. I started journaling, something I hadn't done since college. I even picked up freelance work and made friends with the diner owner, who gives me free pie when business is slow. And most importantly, I started living a life that didn't depend on someone else's approval to feel worth something. So, if you're watching this and wondering whether it's worth walking away from someone who doesn't see you anymore, let me tell you it is. It won't be easy. It won't be quick, but there's peace on the other side. A kind of peace you only find when you stop begging to be loved and start learning how to love yourself again. This was Marshall's Echo Tale. If this story resonated with you, let us know in the comments. What was the single sharpest sentence, like you think you earned that signaled the absolute end of a relationship for you? Drop your thoughts below, hit the like button, and make sure you subscribe to Echo Tales for more stories that explore the shadows and resilience of life.